Let me start with a question that might feel uncomfortable. Have you ever met someone who seemed charming at first, even magnetic, but over time left you feeling drained, confused, or doubting yourself? Maybe you brushed it off, told yourself you were overreacting, or convinced yourself things would change. But deep down, you sensed something was off. That's not an accident. That's the hidden signature of a toxic woman, and if you're not careful, being close to one can quietly unravel your confidence, your peace, and even your future. Most people think they would spot toxicity immediately. They imagine it will come in obvious forms, shouting matches, cruelty, or betrayal. But in reality, it's much more subtle. Toxicity often comes dressed in beauty, charm, or vulnerability. It can feel flattering at first, even exciting, which is why so many smart people fall into the trap. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation. Because unless you know the signs, you risk walking into relationships that look sweet on the surface, but are poison underneath. Here's the truth most people miss. Toxic relationships don't usually begin with conflict. They begin with seduction. That seduction might not even be romantic. It could be a friend, a co-worker, or someone in your family. They know how to hook you. Through empathy, through stories of struggle, through exaggerated charm. They pull you in, they open a loop of curiosity in your mind. Who is this person really? Maybe I can help them. Maybe I can fix them. And before you know it, you're entangled. That's the pattern I want to expose, because once you see it, you can never unsee it. Now, let me give you a warning sign that shows up in almost every case. A toxic woman often lives inside contradictions. She says she wants peace, but thrives on drama. She talks about loyalty, but constantly tests your trust. She claims to be misunderstood, but tells stories designed to make others look bad. This is one of the first clues you must notice. When someone's words and their patterns don't align, pay attention. Because if you ignore this mismatch early on, it will cost you dearly later. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance. The tension that builds inside you when reality doesn't match the story you're being told. Most people resolve that tension by doubting themselves instead of doubting the toxic person. You start asking, maybe I'm too harsh. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe I'm the problem. And the moment you do that, the trap closes. Because toxic people thrive not by controlling reality, but by controlling your perception of reality. But before we go deeper, I want you to imagine this. Imagine investing years of your life into someone who never once truly supported your dreams. Imagine shrinking your goals, dulling your light, hiding your strengths just to keep the peace. Now imagine looking back years later and realizing all that time could have been spent building something beautiful. That's the cost of ignoring these signs. And that's why you must learn to recognize them before it's too late. Now, let's open the first real loop. There are many types of toxic women, but 3 archetypes appear again and again in my research. The first is the eternal victim. The second is the manipulative seductress. And the third is the hidden competitor. Each one destroys lives in different ways, but all 3 share one thing in common. They keep you hooked by triggering your need to prove yourself. I'll explain. The eternal victim is the one who always seems to be suffering. Every story she tells is about betrayal, about how people have wronged her, how no one understands her pain. At first, you feel compassion. You want to help. But what you don't see is that her suffering is her power. By keeping you in the role of rescuer, she keeps herself in control. And the deeper you step into that role, the harder it is to notice that the cycle never ends. She doesn't want healing, she wants attention. She doesn't want solutions, she wants sympathy. And if you stay too long, you'll find yourself exhausted, guilty, and strangely ashamed, because no matter how much you give, it will never be enough. The second archetype is more dangerous. The manipulative seductress knows exactly how to play with your desires. She flatters you, admires you, makes you feel seen in a way no one else has. But hidden beneath that admiration is calculation. Her interest isn't in you, it's in what you can provide. Maybe it's money, maybe it's status, maybe it's emotional energy. She knows how to reward you with affection when she gets what she wants, and withhold it when she doesn't. This hot and cold rhythm is what creates the addiction. You start chasing the high of her approval, forgetting that the approval was never real to begin with. It was a tool. And then there's the hidden competitor. This one is the hardest to spot because she often poses as your biggest supporter. She celebrates your wins in public, but in private, there's always a subtle jab, a little seed of doubt planted in your mind. She says she's proud of you, but then reminds you of your flaws. She says she admires your success, but secretly undermines it. Over time, you begin to notice a pattern. When you're thriving, she's distant or critical, but when you're struggling, she suddenly feels close again. That's because your failure feeds her sense of superiority. And if you're not careful, you'll end up lowering yourself just to keep her love. Now pause for a moment. As I described these patterns, did anyone come to mind? Maybe someone from your past. Maybe someone in your present. If so, that's not an accident. Your intuition recognizes these patterns faster than your mind does. But here's the real question. Why do we stay? Why do intelligent, kind people stay stuck in relationships that clearly drain them? The answer reveals the deepest part of this puzzle, and it has to do with curiosity itself. See, toxic women are masters at creating what psychologists call incomplete loops. They give you just enough affection, just enough hope, just enough promise of change to keep you waiting for the full payoff. But that payoff never comes. It's the same psychological principle that keeps people hooked on cliffhangers in movies or binge-watching entire series overnight. Our minds crave completion. We can't stand unanswered questions, and toxic people know this. They leave you wondering, will she change? Will she finally see my worth? Will things get better? And that wondering is what keeps you trapped. But here's the payoff to that loop. The truth is, the payoff never arrives. Not because you're not enough, but because the game was never meant to end. Toxic relationships are built on perpetual suspense, on keeping you invested in a future that doesn't exist. And once you realize that, the entire illusion collapses. Now here's the next loop I want to open for you. If these patterns are so destructive, why are they so attractive in the first place? Why are so many people drawn to toxic women despite the damage? The answer lies not in them, but in us. There's a psychological magnetism at play, a hidden need we're trying to fulfill through the very person who's hurting us. And once you understand that magnetism, you'll never look at relationships the same way again. Why are people so drawn to toxic women in the first place? The answer might shock you. It's not because of their beauty or charm, though those can be part of the bait. It's because they mirror something unresolved inside of us. They reflect back wounds we haven't healed, insecurities we haven't faced, or desires we haven't learned to control. That's why it feels magnetic. It's not just attraction, it's recognition. On some deep, unconscious level, you feel like you already know them. And you do. You know them because they resemble a wound you carry within yourself. This is why breaking free is so hard. You're not just walking away from a person, you're walking away from a mirror. You're walking away from the part of you that believed love must be earned, or that attention always comes with conditions, or that chaos is normal. And if you don't recognize this inner hook, you'll keep repeating the same pattern again and again, meeting different faces with the same story. Let me give you another clue. Toxic women often use time as their weapon. At the start, everything moves quickly. Instant chemistry, deep conversation, sudden intimacy. You feel like you've known them forever. But then, once you're invested, the rhythm changes. They become distant, confusing, inconsistent. That sharp contrast between the beginning and what comes after keeps you chasing the high of those first days. But here's the truth. Those first days were a performance, and the more you chase them, the more you lose yourself. And that leads to one of the most dangerous illusions of all, the illusion of potential. You don't fall in love with who she is, you fall in love with who she could be. If only she dropped the games, if only she healed, if only she changed. But potential isn't real. It's a projection of your hope. And while you wait for that potential to become reality, your time, your energy, and sometimes even your identity slips away. Now, let's talk about the signs that often get ignored, because these are the quiet red flags that show up before the storm. She thrives on drama but insists she hates it. She rarely apologizes but always finds ways to make you feel guilty. She flatters you in private but subtly disrespects you in public. She demands honesty but hides her own truth. These contradictions are not accidents, they're strategies. They keep you off balance, unsure of where you stand, always trying to win back the harmony you once felt. And that's exactly how she maintains control. But here's where I want to pull back the curtain even further. Toxic women don't just drain your happiness. They can alter the entire trajectory of your life. They influence the choices you make, the risks you avoid, the dreams you delay. Because when you're caught in survival mode inside a relationship, you don't have the energy to build. You're too busy managing chaos to create anything meaningful. And that's how lives quietly unravel. Not with one big explosion, but with years of lost potential. So what's the way out? It begins with awareness. The moment you see the pattern clearly, the spell begins to break. Awareness creates distance. You start noticing the manipulation instead of absorbing it. You start seeing the contradiction instead of excusing it. And with each realization, you reclaim a piece of your power. But awareness alone isn't enough. You must also learn the art of detachment. That means no longer negotiating with the illusion of who you wish she could be and facing who she really is. It means reminding yourself that love without respect is not love at all. And it means walking away not because you hate her, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop participating in your own erosion. Here's the curiosity I want to open next. What happens after you walk away? Many people think the story ends there, but that's when the real battle begins. Because toxic women rarely let go easily.